Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to 2015. This is week 6 of ESL Hearthstone's Legendary Series. We're coming off of a delay because we're trying to wait and see the BattleNet login issues. We recognize that there have been some problems for people to log in, but we do have our first match queued up and ready to go. We're going to play a few games on the European server and then try to see if we can catch up from that point on. So our first match of the day will be Jirachie versus Gooby Sencho. And here alongside with me to bring the action is TJ Sanders, also known as Azumo.
Yep, it's hopefully looking forward to a great 2015 filled with Hearthstone. You can see your bracket on the screen. Of course, these 4 players are the top 4 players from that Open Challenger Cup that ESL broadcasts. Well, doesn't broadcast, but puts on every single Sunday. So all 4 of these players that you see on your screen that we'll be seeing today went through a field of probably about 400 to 500 players, and they made it to the top 4. So that's a really impressive thing. And of course, Gooby Sencho actually was last week as well, or 2 weeks ago since we took a break for the holidays. So being able to make it through that big bracket 2 weeks in a row is actually really impressive.
Yeah, so now Gooby has an opportunity once again to go to the main event. Last week he fell just a little bit short as Delay did deny him and be able to get into that top 8 spot. And this week, maybe it'll be a different story. However, I'm being told that there's a few other players here who are pretty good. Flybird, of course, a Taiwanese player who, these guys have shown a lot of tenacity in their ability to qualify while being able to keep up Syncum's skills. And then Jirachie apparently is the Finnish Pokemon National Championship. So that's really cool to see another person, yet again, crossover from a different CCG to come over to Hearthstone.
Yeah, those card game veterans always do well when they come over to Hearthstone just because they have that strategic backing. And so looking forward to see how he's going to do moving forward today and if he makes it into our match day tomorrow as well.
That's right. So the way it'll happen, guys, as you saw on your screen, there's a double elimination bracket where we have both of the matches that will happen first in the winners portion, and then we'll have the losers, and then the winners match, and ultimately a second place match. These 2 spots determine who are the open qualifiers to go to the main event tomorrow for the top 8. You can find out all this information at esl.gg/legendary series and find out who is playing tomorrow. We have a list of invites that will join players who came from last week, including Magic Amy, Show Zolay. We have 3 new players this week. We have Hyped from Team Tempo Storm. We also have 6-0 from Root Gaming. And then we also have our 3rd invite is Trump from Team Solo Mid. This is a really cool mix of players that I'm really looking forward to as well.
Yeah, the mix of players, and it's all different play styles as well. You have Hype to, at least going into the BlizzCon World Championships last year, was considered one of the best players in North America. Then you have Zixo, who's like the ladder genius. He's one of the top players, or one of the first players to reach Legend every season. And of course, Trump. Trump has actually been playing quite a bit of Constructed recently. And I don't think people really consider him as a popularity invite anymore. He's really stepped up his game as far as Constructed goes. So we'll have to see how he's going to perform tomorrow.
All right, well, before we begin, guys, we want to thank the people who make this possible. If you go to esl.gg/Newegg Esports, you can find all kinds of cool deals on SSD, memory, other cool tech, like Cooler Master, for example, along with Western Digital and Crucial. Check it all out at the link you see below. And support the people. Maybe you need some new gear. Maybe you want to make some exchanges. Maybe you find out that the Christmas gifts you wanted weren't the ones that you were looking for. Instead, you'll find out that link for a very good discount. You can check it all out at, again, esl.gg/Newegg Esports. So our first match of the day, like we said, should be Jirachie versus Gooby Sencho. These guys will be battling in a best of 5 in a format that people might not be accustomed to. We realize it's been a few weeks since we've started, but TJ, can you once again explain how this format will go?
Yeah, basically it's sort of a blind pick format. Each player brings 3 predetermined decks into the day, and they have to predetermine the order of which they're going to play those decks for the first 3 matches. So for those first 3 matches in the best of 5, they'll go in blind, not knowing what deck their opponent has, and they have to switch decks since that list is predetermined. Now for games 4 and 5, it actually goes into a true blind pick stage where those guys can pick any of the 3 decks that they've used and go on to face their opponent who's going to be doing the same thing. So it's really an interesting format. It allows players to sort of have one deck that they're really comfortable with that they can use in game 4 and 5. And since you're going in blind pick, you can't really be greedy with a lot of the tech choices that you make in your deck. Even though we did see people running double BGH last week.
Right, we do. And I'm pretty sure we might see something equivalent to that, if they feel like
Yeah,
there is like, cause the way this format can work is you still can have a mixture of both, right? You can have a deck that you do rely upon, even if you lose with it, but you also
yeah.
can bring anti-specific lineup decks. If you know your opponent's bringing all control, you can have one of those decks that have big game hunter, and that's why I'm expecting to see some fireworks this time around. Now, taking a look at the decks that are being brought for our first match, we have Shaman versus Hunter to start things off, Druid versus Warrior,
Whoa.
and finally Warlock versus Warlock. And before, we saw a lot of handlock play, including from Gooby, but it seems like Zoo has picked up in popularity, especially after Sixo's been able to get some good results.
Yeah, and I've actually been seeing some like hybrid decks of handlock where they take handlock and to better shore up their bad matchups against some aggro matches, they take out like Jirachie and throw in like some better cards to do with aggro, like Implosion. And Frozen, who was actually the first player to hit Legend in North America for the January season, was running a handlock deck that had Implosions and Sea Giant, but with standard handlock cards in it with that. So I thought that was a really interesting choice. We'll have to see how these players are sort of evolving their decks, as the meta for GVG is still changing a little bit. There's some tried and true decks still making it through, like Control Warrior, but this is actually a really different deck lineup than we saw last week. Didn't see Shaman.
Right. Well, we did see, I think, a Shaman, but it wasn't heavily represented, and I think Gooby was also playing Shaman back then as well. Shaman's been in a very interesting spot. I think the reality is people don't know how to plug the new cards in very effectively. Power Mace, I mean, Neptulon's great, but even the new one, right, oh, you're going to have to help me here. The new Murloc, I think it's called the Spirit Walker.
Yeah, the Sylphin.
The Sylphin Spirit Walker. Like, how do you necessarily apply that without just going all in on Murlocs, right?
Yeah.
And creating Murloc Shaman? I think people are still having identity issues with Shaman at the moment. So it's a very tough spot currently in the metagame. People rank in the lower triad of classes in the bottom three.
Yeah.
But overall, I think Shaman's still up there. I think it still can do some cool stuff. I've seen Mech Shaman. I've seen Aggro Shaman. I've seen last or what is it called? Ancestor's Call Shaman, where you like have a bunch of really powerful cards like Earth Elemental and Ragnaros, and then you just last call something out. It doesn't matter what your opponent puts out; you're probably going to hit it harder. And none of them seems to be that competitive and consistent at the moment. But maybe we can see something come out soon. I'm not saying this week, but maybe in about a month from now, I think people will start toying around with the class.
Yeah, they got a lot more tools that sort of changed how a lot of the decks play. And you said it, I think there's a lot of cards that people are unsure of just what type of decks to use them in. Like where does Crackle sit on a deck building deck building level? And so it can be a little tough at times, but as soon as people start to really play around with it and have a good opportunity to say, well, you know, let me just sit down and play 200 games with this deck and just play with each individual card, each individual new card from GVG, then maybe we'll start to see some refined Shaman decks. But I like Shaman. Shaman is one of my favorite classes, and it's usually the class that I make the initial climb with, because usually when you climb from like 15 to 5, before you make that legend push, it's with the class that you're trying to experiment with, and Shaman is the one that I like the most.
All right. Well, we're going to see if that comes into play. In the meantime, we're going to take a few minutes to get set up for our first match. It's Gooby Sencho versus Jirachie. Stay tuned, guys.
If you're serious about gaming, you don't want to waste time waiting around for your games to load. Did you know that installing an SSD helps you get into the action faster? Check out the difference for yourself. As you can see, using a hard drive, you'll be kicking your heels waiting. But with an SSD, you're already in the heat of the battle. SSDs really can help you get a first strike on the competition. Visit Crucial.com to find out more about how SSDs can dramatically improve your system performance.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Hearthstone Legendary Series, week number 6. It's hard to believe that we're already halfway through our season before we get to the LAN finals happening in February 21st and 22nd. Are you pretty excited for that, TJ? Because I'm pretty pumped to get some of these guys to California. They all are complaining about how brutal their winters are, but it's pretty dang nice here in Burbank.
Yeah, the weather's pretty good, and I'm really, really excited for that LAN finals. And I'm excited to see some new faces in competitive LAN. Of course, we saw Dark Wanix, who was sort of an old face, qualify last week, and there's a lot on the line for the next coming weeks. Not only does the first place winner from every week from now on get an automatic invite to that LAN finals, also the other 3 that are in the top 4 with that person move on to the next week. So these guys definitely want to place very highly in these weeks.
Yep, I believe the first place finishers from weeks 1 to 4 get 80 points.
Yeah.
And then the second place finishers get 35. So there's a lot of people that are tied for second, but the first place people seems to be where it's at the moment. They're going to need some really consistent placings. You're looking at guys like Sho, who's going to need to make some big waves if he wants to break those top points. Let's take a look at our match once again. It's going to be Jirachie versus Gooby Sencho. Now, Gooby, last time he was playing with us 2 weeks ago. It was his birthday, and he stayed very late into the night. He was 1 game away from qualifying against Zalay, who did end up denying him and winning his match against Tides of Time. And Zalay will be back tomorrow. And our first match will be Shaman versus Hunter. This one should be interesting because I think that one has been evaluated many times throughout the course of the past few months. Not really sure what to think about it because Hunters, they started getting very, very aggressive.
Yeah.
I've been seeing lots of charge Hunters with Wolf Riders and Arcane Golems again. And, it makes me a little mad. It infuriates me a little bit.
I'm sad to hear that, but this matchup it sort of brings us back to the first couple weeks that we broadcasted when Hunter was very, very popular. And a lot of very popular Shaman players are people that play Shaman a lot say Hunter is not that great of a matchup for Shaman. It's average or poor. And a lot of it depends on the Shaman. We'll have to see what kind of Shaman Gooby's actually bringing because we don't know what this is. And you were talking about it earlier. It might be another month before we see people really starting to bring Shaman a lot.
Yeah.
And seeing very consistent Shaman decks brought. So definitely have to see.
Lots of the innovation has been going towards tweaking existing classes, but people haven't figured out too much of Shaman other than Instant and Crackle and maybe a Neptulon. Other than that, I haven't seen many uses of a lot of these weird new Shaman cards. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Gooby has something different. Maybe the Hunter is something completely out of the ordinary as well. We haven't seen Control Hunters, but I'm guessing this is more of the aggressive Hunter. Let's go into game number 1 and see what Jirachie and Gooby have.
Well, there's a freezing trap, so that doesn't really tell us too much. But I did see a Crackle in Gooby's deck, so that probably indicates that it's going to be, well, I guess we haven't seen much of it, but probably what you said, standard, the tried and true Shaman that we've come to know and sometimes love, and with just a couple extra cards added in.
Well, hold on. We don't know if he's playing a bursty type of Shaman or he's playing, mid-range that has a lot of control. It's like very variable and just a standard Shaman. The freezing trap already is very interesting because I know the very aggressive Hunter likes running double explosive traps and being super aggressive. And the fact that he has Sludge Belchers also indicates that it's a slower variant. He did end up keeping Unleash the Hounds, a great choice against Shaman because you have lots of minions that naturally build up through the Shaman hero power. But I'm not sure if he's running Knife Jugglers or ways to benefit off that Unleash the Hounds compared to how much you normally can get to.
And, I mean, you can always find a use for Unleash in the Shaman matchup, though. And, of course, the Savannah High main, definitely a very slower mid-range type Hunter. Now, a lot of Death Rattle Hunters have been fooling around with the piloted Shredders. in that four spot instead of Gettys or Houndmasters. And I really like that. And I wonder if we're going to start to see more of that, because it's very sticky, it's hard to deal with, it synergizes well with Undertaker, and it's good for those mid-range hunters. So I wonder if Jirachie is in that camp, but we'll definitely have to see. This is also more of a mid-rangey type deck for Gooby. You see the Defender of Argus. Don't really see the Defender of Argus much in Burst Shamans.
Yeah, you know, you bring up a good point. It's more of a defensive approach, and the Defender of Argus will be very important too, because if there is any kind of charge, just even something as simple as a Huffer, you know, that having taunts early on is so powerful. That's why Feral Spirits, you know, I love keeping that card against Hunter. I know some people toss it away, but I genuinely think stopping any damage you can really allows you to leverage cards like Doomhammer, or any other thing that you have. Even a Rock Biter gets more powerful, because then you can make those trades with your own health as a resource, as opposed to using another minion, and you can build it up against a Hunter.
So Shamans, especially pre-GVG, were considered weak against a lot of Hunters just because of the fact that they don't have many heals. And usually by the time they stabilize, it's already too late, and they're too low, and they just need a little bit more damage to push through. So now with anti-heal bots, it shores up the matchup a little bit. They can stabilize and then use a turn to heal up as well, and sometimes it can push them over the edge. But I really like this by Jirachie. He's not flooding the board. He's playing patiently, making sure he weaves in his hero power as much as possible, which I think is really important against Shaman.
That's a good point. Being able to drain the Shaman is really strong, but I think it also is it's not the preferred way to take this Shaman down. He'd like to have a lot of these early game cards, his Undertaker, his Leopard Gnome, that was supposed to be in the opening hand, not his Sludge Belcher, Highmane, and Kill Command.
True.
Those are things that you draw later on. This has been a very clunky draw for Jirachie, and you know, I think he's tempted to just try and set up for the cleanest Highmane possible, but the danger of this is that by doing so, he ends up having a very weak board, and if his opponent has a Hex, then it gets easily dealt with.
And you never want to be giving the Shaman the initiative in this matchup, just because at least it just seems like if they have an answer to like your first big threat, like if you have an empty board and they have a board and you play a Highmane and they have the answer to it, it's hard to dig yourself out of the hole unless you already have a really big lead.
That is a very nice draw. The Feral Spirits is so much better than the Azure Drake, because you need quantity over quality. Even if that Drake was, you know, like a 4/4 with Taunt, it's still better to have these split up so that these many minions can be picked apart. Otherwise, it could have been easily taken out by a Kill Command and then just press that advantage, and you'd be losing too much health. And this Totem still can also come up big too. You know, having that one attack isn't even that bad, honestly.
Yeah, it's pretty decent. You already have the taunts on the board, and it could help take out some tokens. You know that he already used one Unleash, so you're not too worried about flooding the board a little bit. It's a little awkward on its curve, just for the next turn, but then it plays pretty nicely into Dr. Boom. So he's not too worried about it, and stopping the damage early is pretty good.
That Zombie Chow is a very important pickup as well, because now, like we talked about, it gives him the ability to respond back onto the board. His opponent does have... Oh, he's keeping his Zombie Chow. Oh, okay. I thought he was going to put it down, so that way he can answer it, but now he used his Hex, and Highmane's going to be pretty strong.
Yeah, he does have a way to pretty efficiently clear it.
Oh.
And that could help.
Nice.
Wow.
Very nice.
Yeah, I don't think he was too worried about Highmane coming down. He wanted to get through that Sludge Belcher. So both those cards are just really tough to deal with.
Oh, you know, I wonder if he was also thinking about the possibility that if he played Zombie Chow and nothing died, he can't play Dr. Boom and summon 2 bots.
That's true.
I wonder if that ran through his mind. I mean, obviously Gooby was holding on to Zombie Chow for some reason, but I think that's his primary thing, is he realizes Hunter might be in an awkward spot. But still, you know, you don't necessarily want to add to even unleash the Hound's value here.
Sometimes it can feel a little bit awkward playing Zombie Chow outside of your first couple turns, but
oh,
not against Hunter. That rolled the lowest it could possibly roll since he had the spell power on.
That's annoying. You know, it's one less body for Flame Tongue Totem. You know, it's just those kinds of things that might matter if the 3 damage does end up becoming a reason you can't trade on board.
Yeah, very true, very true. And that's the risk you take when you use Crackle. Sometimes you love it, sometimes you hate it.
Well, in this case, I don't think he's loving it. I think Misha, by the way, is one of the better beasts you can get. I don't think I would have liked Huffer at all. And
Leok on an empty board.
Yeah, Leok feels very weak too. You do have Unleash the Hounds, but it felt like the impact of it was minimal.
I think Misha was definitely the best thing that he could have gotten in that situation. But Gooby has a lot of answers right now, and Jirachie's starting to run out of steam. 3 cards in his hand, even cards on board basically. The Mad Scientist, of course, going to get a little more value out of it because of the secret. But now seeing Dr. Boom, this is very dangerous indeed.
He does run Knife Jugglers. Okay. It was a card that was cycled out for a little bit of time, but it seems like it makes a comeback.
I think people were just trying to experiment with that slot and trying to see what they could fit in.
It feels like Jirachie is running a very old school Hunter deck.
Yeah.
When I say old school, I mean like a month and a half. It's not like super old. Like super old would be like River Crocolisk, the cards like that. But
the 100% beast synergy hunters.
Oh wow, Dr. Boom taking one for the team. These boom bots also trigger after, so it wouldn't be able to snipe the Knife Juggler even if it wanted to. Just some interesting interactions there.
Huh.
Okay. Gonna save his kill command.
Okay.
And he gets past the taunt.
That's
that extra juggle.
Those juggles were actually really decent.
Do you think he wanted to snipe that last remaining boom bot, or was he hoping not to hit him at all?
It can be a little risky because you don't want to lose your Knife Juggler like in the middle of Unleash, because that's pretty heartbreaking. But I think he's pretty happy with the outcome there. If the last boom bot had hit like one of the dogs, that would have been ideal.
Oh man, that's a lot of damage. That's 12, 19, 20. I mean, even if that bot rolled high, he'd be still a little bit short. But Gooby's got a lot of damage to push back.
Yeah. And
I think I imagine Lightning Storm is coming out this turn. It's just how does he want to follow it up? Does he set up just a File Elemental just for raw damage?
Probably. It makes the most sense. Fits his curve the most. He'd set up for lethal next turn with Flint Tongue Totem regardless. So, and this is looking pretty rough. We'll see what that trap is, but it doesn't really matter too much at this point. At least he's not gonna have a boom bot on board.
No, he's not. But that boom bot served its purpose very effectively.
Yes,
it took a trap away. And Jirachie looks like he's just dead. He can't actually do anything about this. And the kill command can't even activate and kill off Dr. Boom. So that's going to mean game number 1 goes to Gooby with his Shaman deck against the Hunter. Now, this was a slower Hunter, and we were talking about how the aggressive Hunter does tend to have the upper hand against the Shaman deck. But, you know, Gooby was able to take it against this mid-range Hunter very effectively.
Yeah, the slower the Hunter gets, the more effective Shaman is against it. And, of course, there's always that opportunity for Hunters to just get that blowout start where they get Undertaker, Death Rattle after Death Rattle, and snowball out of control.
But that didn't happen.
No, the hand for Jirachie was not that great early on. It was okay because he did have Undertaker. He did have did draw into some early drops pretty quickly. But being clogged up with Sledge Belcher and Savannah Hyman early on, as long as the Shaman has something to deal with, even just one of those, it can still be a little rough. So Gooby taking that one pretty convincingly.
Okay, so now we move on to Druid versus Warrior. This one's also tough for Jirachie. Druid's also been seeing some recent innovations. I think a lot of people are leaning over towards playing and building it slower and more rampy. Just having more answers, because with Handlock being out in full force, or even just having like Zoo, Ramp still has a chance against it if it just can get defensive, and you have those early game ways to respond to your opponents. And as long as you dodge the Warlock class, honestly, I think Druid's still okay here. So bringing Druid's a very, very strong choice in my opinion. I was telling you I think Druid's one of the top 3 classes at the moment.
Yeah. And I would probably rate it top 4. I think it would probably be in the 4 position for me, but we'll see if I am proved wrong today. And I think it's really strong against Control Warrior. Regardless,
Sure,
I think that the faster Druids are a little bit better because you can endgame super quickly. Hard for Warrior to deal with it, mid-range as well. Slower Druids, though, still I think have a pretty good shot at taking down. I think Druid in general just has a really great matchup against Warrior.
Well, he also has a Harrison Jones, too.
And that's an automatic keep. Oh,
Absolutely.
Wow. Do you like throwing away the keepers in this matchup?
It seems like he has Wild Growths in his deck, which, that's what you would go for.
Just
or at least,
try and always mulligan away for Wild Growths?
There's no guarantee of having a Target for Keep of the Grove, and sometimes you might just... Like, the only play to play Keep of the Grove is to hit the face for 2, and that doesn't feel good.
That's true. Very true.
So, I think you'd rather go for your earlier starts. Okay, maybe he runs Power of the Wild instead of Wild Growth, and he has Violet Teachers. I feel like if you get your Shaded Next Rammus, any kind of early start, that's much preferred over having just a Keeper of the Grove if you have no other play.
Yeah, because I guess you're right, because if you think about it, Shaded Next Rammus sort of serves the same purpose, it just has more versatility. Because if you lay down a Shaded Next Rammus and they throw down an Acolyte of Pain, it's still going to trade evenly in it. You're going to give them 1 card, but that's better than having a dead Keeper in your hand.
Card.
Yeah.
As opposed to Keeper silencing it, you use the card to answer card. It's all very relative. It depends. I think it really depends on your early game momentum as a Druid player. The most important thing that Warrior has at his disposal are weapons to control. But what happens is sometimes the weapons don't matter because you are losing so much health by using the weapons that you're at like 18 health, and then they just like Druidic Charge claw you, and then they combo you the next turn. So the trick for Warrior is to stabilize early, but have recovery options. That's where Shield Maiden, even Shield Block, will definitely come into play. I think it gives Jirachie a very strong fighting chance, unless Gooby picks up some very good momentum, because it looks like his hand is slowed down.
Yeah. And Jirachie, pretty good start for playing against a Druid. You don't want to give them that momentum. Violet Teacher, though, I feel like Violet Teacher can be really, really good in this matchup, but it can also be very, very, I guess, inconsistent. It can fall flat on his face, because if you have like a Death's Bite, it's like one of the perfect ways to deal with the Violet Teacher. And he's got the Whirlwind as well, so he's got sort of that emergency way to be able to deal with it. So he's got a very clogged hand. Harrison Jones is going to come in handy pretty quickly into this matchup, but getting those 2 7-drops in his opening hand from those mulligans, it's really going to hurt him.
I think I'm okay with the shield block coming in here.
Oh yeah.
Just because you don't know if you have an opportunity to play in the next couple turns. Most likely, whatever you're picking up, you're going to be looking to play it. Or even if you need to use Execute and you want to armor up, it's just, I think you want to get a card deeper so that way you have options at your disposal.
Also, he has Shield Maiden as well, so if he needs to find a way to get armor quickly to be able to use a Shield Slam, if he picks that up later on, then he has the means to be able to do that.
Well, that was a very good draw from Gooby to pick up the Spectre Knight, because now Warrior can't deal with it fully in this turn at least.
This is the toughest card for Control Warrior to deal with, I think. One of the toughest cards, especially if it comes down. Like if it gets innervated out or coined out, or even if it just comes down right on turn 5. It's just so annoying to deal with, because a lot of Warrior relies on using the removal to be able to deal with these mid-range creatures or weapons. And neither weapon that they use has the reach to be able to deal with this. Can't be targeted with spells. It's just so annoying for Control Warrior to have to deal with this.
Here's the problem. If he uses the Axe over 2 turns, because he's going to equip the Axe here, right? Because then Shield Maiden comes on the following turn.
Yeah.
Then Harrison Jones actually gets full value.
Oh no!
It snipes this weapon for 2 durability. That's really unfortunate for Jirachie.
And he's shaking his head. He's really, really not happy. And I think he might have even expected that. He might have even saw that coming, because he just really didn't seem pleased with that play at all. And you can tell that it was just really rough play. Well, he picks up a Death Bite, so that's one of the best things he can pick up once Harrison Jones is actually used. So he's going to take a lot of damage in the process, though, if he decides to go with that line of play.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult, but he does have the Whirlwind effect of his Death Bite. plus the actual card Whirlwind. And that, and combined with dropping a Shield Maiden, he might be able to address the board if his opponent just simply drops something with 5 health. And that allows him to control the board a little bit. So I think Jirachie still has some comeback potential here. Next turn won't be as awful as you might think it is. And then he's coming up on turns where he has decent amount of health. He's not going to die from one combo. He's going to drop Ragnaros, and if his opponent doesn't have a response, then he can take care of it. Oh, well, Jirachie, I mean, Gooby very wisely plays around this. He could have just dropped the Violet Teacher with the Wild Growth, that's what I assumed, but
it would have
just died to Death Bite.
Just died to the Death Bite, exactly. Yeah. And then it would have left him with a 1-health Spectral Knight. He's playing very patiently, very slowly. Now, there could be an argument for, well, you have 2 Violet Teachers, maybe you want to push for a little bit more damage, force him to use that second charge of Death's Bite. But he goes with the slower play, preserving those Violet Teachers because he knows that those could be pretty key pieces in his victory later on.
The Wrath for once still refusing to try, like he's still refusing to play these Violet Teachers with any spells because he really wants his opponent to use a Death Bite charge beforehand. And he's just gonna try and milk this Spectral Knight for as much as it's worth.
It's pumped in a lot of damage so far. It's torn through a shield block's worth of armor, a shield maiden's worth of armor. It's doing its job pretty effectively, I'd say.
Is it time to Grommash, or now that you draw Acolyte, do you use the Death Bite charge with Whirlwind?
I think you just play Rag.
Play Rag?
Yeah. I would play Rag and even hold on to Death Bite. Yeah. Because I mean, it's tough to make that call, but how is he gonna? Without BGH, it's gonna be really.
What a draw!
Yeah, and he knows that comes off the top. And how does that play into your head? Do you go on tilt when you see that card come off the top, and then the BGH just fly out right after you play Rag?
Well, he's got Dr. Boom. Okay, he's got Dr. Boom off the top. He's got a guaranteed clear with a second Whirlwind if anything went hazy. So Jirachie's got a way out of this.
He does, but it's still a little bit rough to have to resort to that. But I guess being able to clear off the Spectral Knight is pretty decent. Okay. Well, he's stabilized for now. He's got to be a little bit worried, though, that Gooby's been playing so slowly.
I mean, you are, but at the same time, until your opponent kills you, I think you just have to deal with it. Like, there's no way to play around the combo at the moment because you're above the health. So it's like, unless you're playing around double Savage Roar with an Innervate, which is a 4-card combo? 4-card? Yeah, 4-card combo. It's very unlikely, so he's just take it for what it is.
And he's going to match Dr. Boom with Dr. Boom. So there's double Shade as well. So this deck is pretty packed. It's probably only running one combo, I'd assume. Because we've been through a little bit of the deck, probably about half the deck, maybe a little bit more, and we've only seen one Savage Roar.
This is starting to get a little wild here.
You can push.
It's still risky because you might die, but assuming it goes perfectly, he could push. Like, say he attacked with the Boom bot and hit Dr. Boom, his opponent's Dr. Boom. He uses Execute, and then he can Alexstrasza. But that's just too risky. Yeah, it's way too risky. There's just too many possibilities where that fails. And just as simple as that, right?
But at what point do you have to say, well, maybe it's worth the risk? Because it seems like I'm falling behind in this game. It seems like my my window for win conditions is closing. When do you have to finally make the call to say, hey, let's try and go for an aggressive, risky push? Ooh. Okay.
Ooh, wow, both those Boom bots only doing a few damage to Dr. Boom.
That could have been pretty disastrous.
It could have been, but we avoided that, thankfully. And, well...
This could be really dangerous. He doesn't have a way to effectively deal with this Grommash, so if he doesn't answer this Dr. Boom, he has to.
Yeah, he certainly will, because he realizes Alexstrasza could kill him.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, he's now possibly threatening lethal too, because you don't know if your opponent has combo, and even so, he'll have what, 6 plus 6 is 12. So if he had like a Druid of the Claw with the Savage Roar, that also could be lethal.
I don't think you have. Well,
this is a very tough decision.
Yeah, you have to try and weigh. Will shield block and armor up get him out of range?
Shield block gets you to 21, 23.
You'd need to be at 25 health to get out of range.
That belongs in a museum.
The combo.
I'm very slow today. Yeah, you're right, because it does 24 damage.
Yeah.
So no matter what, you're still within it. Oh. 2 Savage Roars? 12 plus 6 is 18. No, he's short.
Not enough. Not enough.
What about
He could double Savage Roar anyway, just to clear and push through for damage. He could clear the Harrison if he took 5 damage to face, and then clear it off.
Yeah.
It'd be.
No, you're right.
It's a little bit of a. It doesn't feel the greatest, but with Violet Teacher, you actually get a lot more value out of it than what would appear at the beginning. So I think this is the best choice in this situation.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's what you gotta do to clear. And now that Grommash has been used, it's his best tool for clearing, or for finishing the game rather. So you can even give up a little bit of your health.
Yeah. There's no way Warrior's going to be able to do 10 damage to you. Unless... Nope, he doesn't even have any more Fiery War Axes. And that's one of the worst draws that he could see in this situation.
So if he has 2 Savage Roars used, what's his maximum damage here? 4 from the Shade of Naxxramas, plus the 5 on board, so that's a 9. If he has another swipe and a Druid of the Claw, that's 8, so that'd be 17 damage. Oh, and the hero power.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's an effective way to play around a potential death. So I think you just gotta go for it.
Yeah. Even just Force of Nature swipe.
And I think Cenarius should be it. Just to give everything a +2/+2 buff.
Indeed.
And finish him off. So the gamble did not pay off whatsoever for Jirachie, and Gooby will take a 2-0 lead. Now that is, ooh, I like it. I like it a lot. It is a little bit to be expected, just because Druid's that favorite against Warrior, but definitely not looking good at all for Jirachie. He's going to need a lot of help from his Warlock.
No, it was a rough... Well, the first matchup, he actually...
He drew poorly. Right?
He drew poorly. He had a decent matchup, but drew poorly. Second matchup, he didn't draw the best, but again, that's just a rough matchup at the beginning. And seeing Spectral Knights in the first 10 cards, 2 Spectral Knights in the first 10 to 15 cards is rough, because that's one of the hardest humps for a Warrior to be able to get over that matchup. And even though Gooby played a little bit slow, he played patient, protected those Violet Teachers, and in the end, it's just so tough for Warrior to be able to deal with that.
I mean, he actually did draw pretty good, I think. Like, as a Warrior, what more would you want? Like, he got, what did he get? He got 2 Fire War Axes, he got Shield Block, Shield Maiden, an Armor Smith, even picked up an Acolyte and a couple Executes.
Mm-hmm.
I think actually he had almost everything he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is Druid had a good answer anyways.
That's true.
Spectral Knight gave such a problem. Druid also had a slow start, no wild growth. And he had to, like, you know, coin off the top, but Gooby needed some help off the top decks, because he drew both of his heaviest cards, Dr. Boom and Ancient of Lore.
And the BGH. Or the,
oh yeah, that was also very
The BGH
helpful,
was pretty big deal.
that was a very big deal, you're right.
And that's a risky play to go for that just rag drop on like an empty board, when you know your opponent has a handful of cards, and BGH is really popular right now, a lot because of Dr. Boom. But we're going to go into Warlock versus Warlock, and I'm curious to see. Last week we saw, I think, almost exclusively Handlock, maybe, well, besides Darquanic's Warlock, with maybe one Zoo on the
Demon
open
Lock?
event. And So we'll have to see what these guys are bringing. I'm curious. I'm expecting double handlock. Gooby ran it last week.
I'd be very surprised to see no one bring Zoo today. I think Zoo is still very strong and potent. I think it's a great mix-up to bring handlock one week and then Zoo the other. At the same time, Gooby has played handlock in the past. Oh, and Jirachie's also going to go with handlock too. I mean, it's a good class. It doesn't really lose against control decks. And I guess we have ourselves a good old-fashioned handlock mirror.
Indeed. I think this is the matchup that we've seen the most of in the past couple weeks at least.
This matchup?
Yeah, last week we saw...
No, we saw handlock versus warrior.
Handlock versus warrior.
Way too
yeah,
many times.
That's true. But handlock versus handlock, I guess, was a pretty close second. I felt like we watched so much handlock versus handlock last week. Because I remember just getting confused, like, who's who? Magic Amy, you could tell because of her golden cards, but everybody else is like, who's who? Which handlock's which?
Well, Jirachie is the one with the Molten Giants, so we can peg that for now.
Okay.
Nope. Okay, well...
That's out the window. Well, there's... I guess...
we'll be able to follow along based off of the production crew. They've been doing a good job.
Yeah.
So the player that goes first, generally speaking, has the advantage, but it looks like it's going to be like a play here for the Twilight Drake for Gooby to take initiative. He doesn't have a clear turn 4 play, so saving it just leaves initiative to your opponent.
Mm-hmm.
But you do make the Drake a little bit weaker to a Giant, because if you do play the Ancient Watcher and hold, or if you even coin out the Ancient Watcher, then the Drake does end up having 9 health, right?
And that's a really big deal, like you said. Being able to match up against that Giant, having 9 health versus 8 health in the mirror matchup is huge. Very huge. And being on the coin can sometimes be a liability in the mirror matchup, just because of that weird interaction. If he was in a position where he didn't have any plays, like didn't have the Ancient Watcher in that situation, and he was maybe not forced, but felt inclined to coin out the Twilight Drake, and then a Mountain Giant came out, he would have been in a pretty rough situation.
Well, here we go. The 9 health Drake should allow it to fight toe-to-toe, assuming his opponent doesn't have a Mortal Coil, like you were talking about. Or I guess a Dark Bomb.
Dark Bomb. Wasting a little bit of the Dark Bomb damage, but I guess you're not too worried about that.
Maybe you don't have to, though. You can silence the Drake and then Dark Bomb it. There is an Ironbeak Owl tucked away on the very corner.
I like that as well.
And this puts Gooby in a very awkward spot. He gave up his coins, so he doesn't have the ability to respond to this Giant very easily. Instead, he traded the coin in for a card. And it could be that he's also fearless because he has 2 Molten Giants in hand. But, yeah, it's still very precarious, right? It's just like you don't want to take too much damage. Sometimes you see on the off occasion someone runs the Arcane Golem with the power overwhelming. You might just die.
A lot of time, handlock matchups go one of 2 ways. The first one is if they both go toe-to-toe and each have answers for whatever their opponent throws out. Then we get to those very long handlock games where it's very close and it comes down to the wire. And then there's handlock games where one player just has all the answers. Usually the player that goes first, they just have threat and then an answer, and then a threat and then an answer, and the game snowballs out of control very, very quickly. So this one could get rough for Gooby if Jirachie keeps throwing out threats and he just gets stuck in a point where he has to react without putting his own threats on. He could be in a rough situation. Because like right now, he could remove the Mountain Giant, but then leave the Twilight Drake on the board, or remove the Twilight Drake, leave the Mountain Giant on the board. And then once again, he's giving initiative over to Jirachie to put down a threat and force Gooby to have the answer.
I think it's okay because you do have the Molten Giants to back it up. You're normally right if you just keep losing tempo, but the Molten Giants for 0 mana or close to it is some of the best tempo you can ever ask for.
It's very true.
And you also have Shadow Flame plays while being able to taunt in the next turn. So if he picks up Shadow Flame as his next card, he's back in business. And like you said, there are big swings in this matchup overall, so it can definitely turn on its head very quickly. I've had so many games when I'm playing as handlock, I feel like I'm winning, and then the opponent handlock just beats me because I overextended.
You also, and that sort of just shows you the volatility of this matchup. You have to play really precisely Because if you overextend or you don't respect the removal potential from your opponent, you could get overwhelmed pretty quickly. And like Shadow Flame could be a huge card. Like if you overextend the board and then they just lay down a giant Shadow Flame, like lay down their own Molten Giant, Shadow Flame, both your Molten Giants. Right. You have to really respect that type of removal. Well, there's the BGH a couple turns too late.
It's a little bit too late, but it's still rather useful.
Yep.
I'm wondering if Gooby can get away with tapping here. Let's see, if he's going to be tapping, he's down to 13 health. He's still going to taunt it up. His opponent, if he has a silence, it'd be... Like, say he has Siphon Soul silence. Nah, the most he could do would be, like, 11 damage if he had that, so...
Thought about it for a second, but then decided to go ahead and go for it. Alright. Well, he's got to be pretty satisfied with his hand. Because he does have the Molten Giants, also has a Siphon Soul ready for a big threat, but... Jirachie's looking pretty good too, I'd say.
Yeah, now it's like the question of whether or not he wants to push even further in, right? So if you Siphon Soul here, then you attack in, it's like, well, you know, he's at 9 health. Am I worried about summoning? Because now that he played one Molten Giant, he can't super, like, destroy you, right? He could play, because usually you play 2 Molten Giants, you Shadow Flame one of them and, like, destroy the board.
I think Siphon Soul, Dark Bomb, push. Oh, no, he's going to get the Mountain Giant down while he can.
And taunt up one of them.
Shadow Flame.
Okay. It's actually it's a very middle of the road play.
Yeah.
It's using your Shadow Flame, but you get out an 8/8 instead. Yeah, I guess it's definitely an appropriate play. You're not expecting to win the game with this Mountain Giant at all.
Yeah, I like it.
And I think if you dumped Siphon Soul, it like made the mana a little bit awkward too, because then you'd like have to play your Dark Bomb, and I think he wants to keep it as capable burst.
That's true. Being able to push through against handlock sometimes is a way that you can win.
Right.
In a situation where your opponent wouldn't necessarily expect it to give the advantage. And I guess sometimes holding on to the Siphon Soul as long as you can in this matchup's pretty good.
Yeah, it is true. You might need that Siphon Soul for more than just that one giant, the first giant, right? 'Cause that was Gooby's first giant.
And you're always guaranteed a Siphon Soul, but you're never guaranteed a Shadow Flame. So there could be, if you have the option to remove a Shadow Flame, it feels better than to, if you have to choose between both. Because if you don't have a board and you have to find a way to remove, like right now, then it could be a little rough. But he's got 2 Siphon Souls, so he's not too worried.
Alright, well, back over to Gooby. He's picked up some really powerful legendary cards, Ragnaros and Dr. Boom. This has been the recent past week innovation from Handlock. They really like having these late game cards. Some of them have even cut Dark Bombs.
Yeah, I saw that.
And just run double Big Game Hunter and just completely win the control matchups. This could be a call that Gooby's made. And with seeing Ragnaros and Dr. Boom, it just seems like he's leaning heavily towards that.
Yeah, I think I was watching Life Coach play a very slower version of Handlock with double BGH and lots of legendaries and like a Sneed's old Shredder as well thrown in there.
Wow, Sneed's, huh?
Yeah, Sneed's. Yeah.
Just tosses in anything.
Yeah. It was pretty cool. Sneed's, of course, one of my favorite cards from GBG.
Well, this is definitely awkward. I wonder if you can tap in Molten Giant as opposed to just play Molten Giant. And you know, as the Handlock player here, you have to be thinking about every single time you can afford a tap. And I think he's realizing it's too risky. If his opponent has a second Siphon Soul, another way to get past this giant, he might just die if he taps. And that's the right call, I think. Yeah.
Well, I think you can safely say Siphon Soul is going to be. I mean, I think you tap first. It opens up opportunities for you to Siphon Soul and then maybe Mortal Coil. He could.
Does he have to though? Like, you want to try and save your Siphon Soul for something else.
But what else is there?
You can trade in one of your minions, 2 of your minions, Mortal Coil it, do something else.
No, I meant like what other threats are you looking to clear off with a Siphon Soul?
Well, if you're holding cards like Ragnaros and Dr. Boom, it might be a little irresponsible to assume your opponent doesn't have it, right?
Okay. I see what you're saying.
I prefer trying to save
it as long as possible.
If it's your last one, because now it's like there's no Siphon Souls. It's like, well, here we go. This is the best chance we have. But I mean, Gooby's in such a dominant position that Jirachie's he's only got responses. He doesn't really have anything to take initiative on the board.
Yeah. Whereas you look at
other than the antique heal bot.
You can look at Gooby. He's got Dr. Boom, Rag, Mountain Giant. It's Draxus, and he's also got that 6/6 on the board, which is very threatening. Now this is where I think it's really, really tough, because Hellfire Dark Bomb, I guess, is one of the only options here. Because that you don't really want to use your Siphon Soul on an Argus Loath. That doesn't feel very good, because you know for a fact that there's going to be a lot of bigger threats, and Gooby hasn't even been through that many threats.
Right. But Gooby takes this opportunity to play Jiraxis, and the really scary thing is Ragnaros, Dr. Boom, all of them are compatible while being able to slide in an Inferno. This is going to be an uphill battle for Jirachie, unless he draws Sacrificial Pack off of a life tap. Alright, well, he didn't get it.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
So it seems like the Finnish Pokemon national champion is a little bit on the ropes here. Jirachie. I want to say Sriracha every time I look at his name.
Yeah, that J looks like a backwards S. I totally. Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah, like if you squint and cross your eyes a little bit, you're like, oh, Sriracha.
Well, Jirachie isn't out of it quite yet. He's got ways to stall, and Sludge Belcher and Molten Giant are 2 cards. I wonder if playing Molten Giant here is okay, but, whoa. Oh, mistake, maybe? No, like, I think if he wanted to play BGH, he would have played it first, but you can't play it after the Molten Giant drops. And, of course, you'd rather keep BGH, too, for what your opponent will drop.
He might have been trying to click over the Sun Fury Protector.
Ah, okay. Yeah, it probably was something like that.
But, yeah. I don't think BGH, even if he had played the BGH first, it just wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense at all. Unless you're trying to push for a lethal, right? Because you have 12 damage.
That's very true, actually.
I mean, maybe Jirachie's not trying to go for the swing, but trying to go for the kill.
Yeah. You look at his hand, and it seems like he has Siphon Soul available, so he could push through a taunt. But with your Axis up, it's hard to expect that there would only be like 1 taunt for you to have to get through. Usually, since you have such a cheap way to summon a pretty big body with that 6/6, you can usually get 2 targets out for an Argus or a Sun Fury.
Story of every single handlock game is so close yet so far. Jirachie got Gooby down to some pretty low healths, but he doesn't look like he'll be able to make that final push. He's got ways to stall though. Lotheb plus the Sludge Belcher is good stall tactics. Maybe allows him some room to pick up a Shadow Flame to swing the board, but still it looks very tough for Jirachie to climb out of this hole.
Yep. Still a possibility for him to maybe have a turn where he can stall enough to pick up Jiraxis to get himself back up to a healthy level, but at this point when you've already lost initiative, usually the first Warlock to be able to use Jiraxis safely is the one to take it, just because at that point you're usually at a position where you can start pushing for damage, and if your opponent has to waste an entire turn using Jiraxis, that's most of the time enough for the opponent to be able to push through for lethal, so it can be a little rough. He might not even find a turn to use Jiraxis, even if he draws it.
Oh, he doesn't trust the the Sludge Belcher, because it might have silenced, and doesn't, of course, trust the taunt with the Sun Fury Protector, because it's easily dealt with those on board. So he goes for the Antique Heal bot. What do you think about that?
Well, there was a lot of damage on board. So I like the fact that you can't silence a heal. So it's the safest option in that scenario, I'd say. Because there was a lot of damage sitting on board. There was 13 damage sitting on board.
Oh boy.
Well,
Do you go for it?
this is about as safe of an opportunity as you can get. That Lothep bought him just enough time. This is one of the only scenarios where you're going to be able to use Jiraxis when your opponent used it first, is when your opponent has to deal with your board without being able to put board back themselves. If he was able to Shadow Flame and lay a threat in that scenario, Jiraxis would be risky. But this is the only opportunity that he's going to get to use it.
Well,
And this might allow him to at least buy himself some time.
I
Nope,
mean, you just
kidding.
play Ragnaros and
Yeah.
end the game, though, because he's got enough damage to cover him over. And Gooby's going to 3-0 Jirachie
Wow.
in the first series of the day.
So Gooby had a very grueling week last week when he qualified for the Friday match for the Challenger Final. But he was beaten out by Zalay in a very close series. I believe it was 2-3 in that series. But this week it looks like he's
having
turning it
another
around a little bit.
Yeah.
3-0 in his very first matchup. He's could ride that momentum into qualifying for tomorrow.
Pretty solid play overall from Gooby. Liked a lot of his small decisions that he opted to be very safe and defensive around. He played around a lot of cards that would have given him trouble, especially his Druid versus Warrior game. Definitely liked the way he approached that from the beginning and was able to eke out a very important game 2 win. So let's take a look at the bracket to see where Gooby has advanced to. He's going to be awaiting the winner of Aussie versus Flybird. Of course, Flybird is from Taiwan, playing from Hong Kong Alliance. We don't know too much about Aussie, though. It'll be the first time that we see him or her. We don't really know his background or her background.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't want to discriminate.
Don't want to make any assumptions either.
Yeah, so that'll be happening as soon as we can get more information about what's happening with all the servers and stuff. So we're going to take a few minutes. We do want to thank our sponsors, too, before we go. You can check out all their cool stuff at esl.gg/Newegg Esports. Check out all the cool products. You have a few minutes to do that while we take a break and make sure that we can get our next match between Aussie versus Flybird. Stay tuned, guys. More action from Week 6 of the Challenger Finals right after this.